Hi there, I'm Andrea Koppel, and it's time for coffee, the podcast where you get to hear firsthand what the jobs and careers that interest you the most are really like. Hey there, Java junkies! If you are an aspiring journalist and you're gay or queer or trans, then this is the episode for you, my friends. Because my next guest is a badass video reporter and senior producer at the Wall Street Journal. But before I introduce my friend and former colleague Jason Bellini, I want to make sure you're all signed up for the Java Junkies Journal. That's our weekly newsletter that we send out bright and early on Mondays to give you the inside track on the 5 episodes we're dropping that week. Otherwise, you won't know until the day of whose episode is dropping. So even if you're subscribed, it is a great way to preview whose episodes you're definitely going to want to binge on during your morning commutes. Just head on over to Time for Coffee at the Time for Coffee website, time4coffee.org, and sign up. Now, my friends, grab your mug and take a chug of a delicious caffeinated beverage, because it's time for another caffeinated career conversation. And my guest is Jason Bellini, who is a video reporter and senior producer at the Wall Street Journal. Jason has 2 decades of experience as a journalist, working for CNN, MTV, CBS News, Bloomberg TV, and on and on. Jason has received numerous awards, including the 2006 Journalist of the Year Award from the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. Most recently, Jason has been the host and producer of a video series called Moving Upstream, in which he explores the trends, technologies, ideas, and challenges that are headed our way. In each episode, they visit the places and meet the people who can help us to better understand what's upstream. Jason, welcome to Time for Coffee. Are you still caffeinated and ready to go?
Yes, indeed. I'm buzzed. I'm focused. I'm ready to go. Andrew, thank you so much. It's good to be with you.
You know, Jason, I got to tell you, I was binging on Moving Upstream over the weekend, and what a fantastic show. I mean,
well, thank you.
The level of production, the depth of reporting is just exceptional, Jason.
Wow, that means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
Oh.
I can tell you, we've been working hard on this show. That's for sure.
Well, could you share with Java Junkies what Moving Upstream is, and also kind of lift the curtain a bit and share how many folks, how many colleagues are working with you behind the camera, in addition to you being the on-camera talent, and actually what it takes to produce these stories on the Wall Street Journal website?
You bet. Delighted to talk about it. So we're now in our 2nd season. Now, the first season was, say, a bit of an experiment, and it was really just me and one other colleague, Matt McDonald, young producer, and we went to work on this. We were given the opportunity to do a longer form type program, and it was really blue sky kind of opportunity. What do you want to do? What do you want to make this? And the thought at the time was, well, there's so many things that I'd love to explore. I've been doing a lot in the realm of politics, but I was just interested in what are some of the real underlying currents? What are some of the technologies and ideas that are shaping our world right now? And began digging in on some of those things. And so our first season, we ended up going to Asia for a month. We did a lot on robotics. We had developed a thing for robotics and the future of the workplace, and how AI and robotics are shaping the future of employment. Asia was a fantastic place to go and to explore that. But a lot of the work that goes into this show, most of it is in the pre-production, figuring out what stories to tell and how to tell them. One of the biggest advantages that I try to exploit is working for the journal itself and having very collaborative colleagues all over the world with whom I can consult and who often are generous with sharing their contacts and help me shape the stories that I'm working on. Will help me take a germ of an idea and turn it into something. And that's a huge advantage. And I'm delighted to work for an organization that is so collaborative. I've been other places where people hold their own contacts closer to the vest and
Yep.
aren't so kind and generous. But that's I think allowed us to find some fascinating stories to tell.
So how long does it take you to produce any, given story that is among the Upstream products that are on the website right now?
The answer is that it depends. So some stories will take, for example, one of the most recent episodes took us to Brazil for a story about gene-edited cattle. I don't know if you saw that episode.
I did, the golden calf.
The golden calf, yes. Well, that was a piece that I've been working on for, 6 months. And when I say working on it, that I'd made contact with this company and they told me about this, met up with the CEO at a conference and told me about this. I became intrigued. And then the calf wasn't born at that point. And so then we were waiting to see if this calf was, at that point, it might have been multiple. Only one survived. And then it was negotiating getting to go over there and keeping this as an exclusive story for us. They weren't going to, so they wouldn't tell anyone else. And we ended up going at the beginning of September to go shoot this story. And then once we were back, it took about 4 or 5 days to go through all the material, to write it, and then edited it in 10 days. Once we actually had the material, it was a fairly quick turnaround.
You actually had the birth of this calf. You had footage of that.
Yes, we did, and I'm quite proud that we did, because that involved working with a freelance photographer, making the arrangements for them to be there. There's a lot of negotiation and coordination involved in each one of these pieces. They wouldn't let us be there for the birth. We wanted to be, but they've had this particular cloning ranch had a bad experience in the past where they allowed journalists on site, and then there was contamination that may have been because of the journalists were there, and the animals died. Anyway, they were adamant we could not go ourselves. Then we had to wait several weeks, and I think it was also they didn't want us to be there if the calf died, and to be filming that and showing an unsuccessful experiment. So but we were delighted that footage worked out, that we were able to have that moment.
Well, it was such a fascinating story because this, as you said, was the first Angus calf to be gene edited to be heat tolerant. And
right. You really did watch it, didn't you?
Oh, I did. Absolutely. Can you share with Java Junkies why that is something that this particular company was working on?
They've had a number of projects in the gene editing realm. That's what they do. And the reason why they were interested in this is, they're a company. It's ultimately about making money. They see a big financial opportunity. If they can take prime Angus elite cattle from the United States and have them thrive down in the tropics where they don't do so well because of the heat. And down in Brazil, the meat goes for twice the price when you're prime Angus beef. Now, the implications are much bigger than that. And we explore a little bit of that, but we didn't have time to get into it that much. But climate adaptation for animals in general, that could end up being very significant going forward. If there are ways of doing that via gene editing, bringing animals that would otherwise not be able to survive in parts of Africa, other hot parts of the world. And then also, if we're talking about climate change, they talk about how climate change could be an opportunity in terms of these technologies, is that you're going to need animals that are able to survive at temperatures that they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. Another story I saw, and you've already alluded to this, and this story in particular, I think will interest Java Junkies. The episode was entitled, "The Robots Are Now Hiring."
Oh, yes. This was an interesting one. And credit goes to my colleague, Hilke Shellman. She came on for the new season, and she came on board with some really interesting ideas. And she'd actually been intrigued by this and been at some conferences where she was doing reporting on this to kind of tease out the idea that there are now companies that are providing services to Fortune 500 companies all over the world to help them be more efficient in their hiring. And interestingly, they're using artificial intelligence, machine learning to analyze video interviews. Now, video interviews, it turns out, and I've talked to a number of young people who've graduated from college and applying to jobs, and they're doing video interviews. I took one for a customer service rep, and I did horribly on it, where you're given a scenario. How would you respond to this? And you pretend like you're in that role, in that job, right? What you may not know, you probably don't know, is that it could be analyzed by artificial intelligence before a human ever watches it, if a human ever watches that video interview. So what's that AI doing? Well, it's actually comparing you to the highest performers. And it's looking at your, and I love this term, micro expressions, the micro expressions on your face, and seeing how your micro expressions square up to those of the highest performers, what your word clusters are, because it's not sophisticated enough to really understand what you're saying, but it's able to analyze the words that you're using and to see if those are comparable to the highest performers, and then rank you. And the issue there, I think that raises a lot of issues from an ethical standpoint. One of them, obviously, is most people don't know that this is happening. Two, is this idea of word clusters and micro expressions. Is this real science? Some say yes, some say no. And three, I think that this is also worthy of discussion, because is there sort of like a common set of features that make someone more effective? I think that there are a lot of times the outliers in life can be some of the best people, and are those people being eliminated? And really, this is being used as a filtration device. Now, HireVue, the company that we visited in Utah that provides one of the most popular platforms, they say, well, no, the companies can watch all of the interviews and be evaluated by a human. And I asked, well, does that mean that everyone's going to watch? Why don't they just look at the top 5? People are busy. They don't have time to watch everybody else. Watch the top 5 who've been ranked and choose from them. And they said, well, the companies can do that. And so I can only imagine that that's probably what's happening.
Yeah, I remember I saw that part of the piece, and I think they said, well, maybe they'll watch your answer to a question. They're not necessarily going to watch the whole interview, but maybe they'll look at one piece of it. And I thought that piece in particular, Jason, it looked like it took a lot of time, and there was a fair amount of post-production that was involved in pulling it together. Do you remember how long that took you, the whole sort of soup to nuts process to get it on the web?
Actually, well, after we shot all the material and we visited several locations for doing this, then I took about 3 weeks or so. The most challenging part of the process was not in the actual editing of the video and putting together the animations and the graphics. It was the reporting itself. And the journal, it's a challenging place because the standards are very high. And I know it's true of other news organizations as well, but they're incredibly tough. You're subjected to a lot of a rigorous review from our standards department. This one didn't have that many legal issues involved, but you're challenged by your colleagues to make sure that you are really everything is locked down and absolutely correct. And the journal also has a policy, and it's a very strict policy, which I respect. It's called the No Surprises policy. And what that means is anyone you mention, any individual, any company, institution that you mention, they should not be surprised when they see in the Wall Street Journal or watch a Wall Street Journal video themselves mentioned, right? You need to reach out to them, give them an opportunity to respond, to comment, to clarify. And that takes a lot of work. So if someone mentioned, it's not just what I'm saying in the story, but if someone we're interviewing mentioned a company that they were applying to, well, we have to reach out to that company and try to find out, okay, is this true? Did they actually apply to them? What does the company say? Did they apply this technology? And so it takes a lot of work to nail all that stuff down and to adhere to that policy.
Yeah, definitely. Jason, take us into a typical day. And I know you're a journalist, so there really is no typical day, but to the best of your ability, what would we be seeing if we were kind of a fly on the wall watching you as you go through your day at the Wall Street Journal?
Typical day. Okay. Well, I first wrestle with my alarm clock and we battle it out usually for a good hour or so, because I set it for an unrealistic time. I say I'm going to wake up at 7 a.m. and it's trying to make that happen. And then usually it doesn't wake up until about 8. And then I'd go get first cup of coffee and I'm reading in on the news, because I know that once the day gets going, I'm not going to have an opportunity to really kind of sit down and read articles and know what's going on in the world. So I value that time. So usually I get myself an hour to read. We call it reading in. Mm-hmm. And once I've done that, then it's tackling the mountain of emails. I try to make that the first thing, or unless there's anything more urgent. And it's a lot of times I'm working on usually 5, 6 stories at once. And so there's incoming traffic, things that need to be dealt with on those stories. And so that honestly takes a couple hours of my day sometimes. It's just dealing with, keeping these stories on track, keeping them moving, responding to sources, asking questions, doing the back and forth. Then I'm oftentimes delving into a script, and sometimes it's multiple scripts. We've got new material that just came in. Okay, I need to watch that. I need to find the best moments in that and figure out how that fits into the story. I'm coordinating with a video editor, coordinating with the producer of the piece. And from there, I feel like I'm just on the treadmill. You crank it up to 10 and I'm just running. If I'm lucky, I'll race downstairs, 3rd floor, grab some lunch to eat at my desk, and it's just go. And phone calls. I usually have several phone calls scheduled during the day, 4 or 5 different calls, maybe related to the story I'm working on now, or maybe related to a story that seems like it might have potential 6 months from now. So you got to keep priming the pump if you want to have stories for the future. Now, you can't just worry about today. You got to be worried about 6 months from now as well. The day keeps going on and on and on. If I'm lucky, I'll escape to go down to the gym for an hour. I haven't been as successful with doing that lately. I've just been too busy. Oftentimes we're coordinating to trips and travel. And then before I know it, it's 7, 8 p.m. and realize, okay, all right, I'm exhausted. Time to go home, and whatever the evening will bring. And rinse, repeat. That's a kind of a day. It's hectic, but fun. But it's a lot of fun.
I would think that one of the skills that is essential to be the kind of a journalist that you are, because there, of course, are folks who just do one story or maybe 5 stories in a year, right? But to be the kind of journalist that you are, who is doing long form pieces, but has 5 in process at any given time, is you need to be one hell of a multitasker.
One hell of a multitasker. And also, I don't think it's possible without really using the calendar well. I'll look at the stories that I'm working on, and if it could be 5, 10 things, and I'll go through each one of them. They're like, okay, what can I plug into my calendar today to keep that one moving, to keep advancing that one? I don't have an assistant. I'm my own assistant. I've got to schedule my time and make sure that there's things that are locked down. Otherwise, just the normal chaos of the day will interrupt and you'll never get to those things.
When you say use the calendar well, do you mean like Google Calendar, or what type of calendar?
We're on the Google Suite, which I love. And yeah, any calendar will do, I'm sure. And that is plugging in phone calls with people, plugging in. I even set time to prepare for an interview. I'll say, okay, I need to give myself an hour for this, and I'll put that on the calendar rather than just have a to-do list. The things on the to-do list don't get done unless there's time allotted for them. And I find it most effective to be really scheduled with my day, setting aside 30 minutes to do expense reports and putting that on the calendar. Otherwise, I won't get to them. And oftentimes, even when they're on the calendar, I don't get to them. But at least there's a fighting chance if they're scheduled in.
That is such great advice.
I wish I held to my advice more, but I do to a degree. But life happens all the time. And so, that's the nice thing about the calendar. You can take that block of time and you can move it down, move it to later in the day or move it to the next day. But it's still there. It exists. And then you got to do it.
So, Jason, I remember you when you were, frankly, a young Java junkie running around the world working for CNN with a handheld digital camera and a laptop. You were a one-man band, what we called back then and probably still do today, producing all kinds of cool stories. How did that begin? Was that your idea to do that, or did someone else suggest it to you?
All right, well, I'll tell you the story. One of the initial inspirations was Anderson Cooper, because when I was in high school, he was on Channel 1 News. This is the show for high school students. And he, at that time, had some stories that he did that he shot with a small camera. This was even before the really good broadcast quality ones came along. Then when I was in college, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I was studying history at Georgetown, and I read about a camera that had come out. It was the VX1000, whatever it was, from Sony. And it was supposed to be the first broadcast quality small camera. It was $4,000. A lot of money for a college student.
Oh, yeah.
So I asked my grandparents, I said, can you loan me the money? Which I never paid them back, but And they agreed to it. And so I started going out and shooting stories with it. And at that time, there wasn't a good way to edit them on a computer, right? You had to put it onto tape and you had to go tape to tape. It was a nightmare. And there's a production house in DC that I was doing freelance work for as a production assistant. And so I would go in on the weekends or sometimes late at night when I could get on the equipment and start putting together stories. Try to keep this short. I graduated from college. I wanted to then sort of just go be a one-man band gallivanting around the world and doing stories. Well, I tried that for a month and I lived out of a van for a month and I realized this is insanity. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm totally clueless. This is absurd. I'd been an intern at CNN one summer, applied to be entry level there. And so once I was in the door at CNN, I continued to go out whenever I had a chance to go try to shoot my own stories and use the equipment there at CNN to edit them. Then there was the show that they had at the time. It was called CNN Newsroom. It was a show for high school students. And I started pitching ideas to them and put some stories together. And I got a couple on the air. And it was a thrill. I mean, it aired at 5 a.m. and teachers would record it and then show it in their classrooms, right? Then the war in Kosovo broke out. This is 1999, if I recall correctly. I was like, I am going to go. This is a moment when I just need to go there. I need to get there. And so I told my boss that I was going on vacation for 2 weeks. I didn't tell her what I was doing. And I came up with this whole scheme to get myself over there, involved getting on a military cargo plane, riding in the back of a cargo plane and flying into Albania. And then once I was there, I showed up at CNN's doorstep. This was in Albania and said, "Hi, I'm Jason. I work for the show, the Newsroom." And I went out and started shooting stuff with my camera. And I remember bringing stuff back to some of the correspondents, and I was a bit of a daredevil. I was reckless in the way I look back at it now. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but I would go and go get stuff. And I remember one time I went out for 2 days. Like, I want to spend 2 days with a refugee and just see what it's like to be a refugee. And I sort of rode with them, and they were like, "Where the hell were you? We were out of touch with you for 2 days. I told you I was going to be away. I was going to call refugees." Anyway, I came back with material, and then I would just share it rather than doing stories for that show. I did a couple for them, but I was giving it to the reporters. I'd be like, "Hey, I got this material. You want to use it in your piece?" And they're like, "Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, we'll take it." Ultimately, I was asked to stay over there. So I ended up staying for about 6 months. And that's where I really learned how to be a journalist and what it was to be working in a field. I got to work with some of the best photographers, producers, correspondents that CNN has, and they have some great ones. And so I did that and came back, and then I wasn't sure what to do next. I wasn't going to go back to ripping scripts and running the teleprompter, but MTV was starting a team that was going to cover the 2000 election. And I applied, and they were looking for someone who could do what I did, which is, be a one-man band, go out. And they thought this is a new technology, these cameras that allowed someone to go out and run around and produce broadcast quality material by him or herself, right? So did that for a year. And then during that year, and I made a little bit of money while I was in Costa Rica because I wasn't spending any money, and I was paid $300 a day, which I thought it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my riches. So get back. And then while I was in MTV, Apple comes out with a new laptop and a program called Final Cut Pro. And I read a bunch of things about it, and I was like, this is interesting because it purported to allow you to be able to edit broadcast quality video, export it, and do it all on your laptop, right? So I bought it and started playing with it. And I was like, this looks pretty damn good. I think this works. And so I went down to Atlanta and visited the international desk. And I remember I visited Steve Cassidy. I don't know if you ever worked with him. Steve Cassidy, I showed it to him, and he's like, "Wait, so let me get this straight. You're saying you could go in the field with this. You don't have to send all these cases and cases of equipment. You could shoot with a small camera, edit on a laptop, and then put it on the air." I go, "I think so." And he said, "All right, well, let's get the engineers down here." And so some engineers looked at the footage, and they're like, "Yeah, this looks good." So then I came with my proposal to them. I said, "Why don't you try me out? Let me be a guinea pig. I'll go out in the field as a one-man band, a backpack journalist, and go do stories and send them back." And they went for it. And so that's what I did for the next 5 years.
Wow.
It was a wild adventure. And, pretty quickly people realized that this technology was here to stay. And some people were not happy about that either, or not happy about my presence. That was part of the challenge that I had there I think, frankly, some people saw this as a threat. There's some correspondents who thought that this is the last thing I want to be doing, is running around with a camera and a backpack. To hell with that. And so it had its challenges, let's say.
You were a pioneer.
I suppose so. I think that whether I came along or not, the technology had come along, and it was going to be adopted widely quickly.
Well, your grandma must have been so proud. Was she still alive to see the stories that you were doing on CNN?
Sadly, she was not. She died my senior year of high school. So no, she never got to see that work for CNN.
Oh, well, I'm sure the rest of your family was really proud.
Indeed, they've been amazing supporters of mine, that's for sure.
So, Jason, you've had quite the career as we're hearing here. And that career has been recognized. You got the 2006 Journalist of the Year. Unbelievable, from the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. I mean, not just like getting a medal for a story, but for the year. How did you win that award, Jason? And what was it that helped you win it?
So after CNN, I took a job on a program called CBS News on Logo. The Logo was a channel created by MTV to serve the LGBT community. They contracted with CBS News for CBS News to do a news program for them. So I worked for CBS News as the host and correspondent for this program. And this was something really new. The network had just gone on the air, and I felt like I was, taking a pretty considerable risk going and doing this because my parents were particularly worried. They thought, you're going to be known forever as a gay journalist. Why are you doing this? Why do you want people to know all this about you? Da, 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 da. But I felt like, and I think one of the reasons I did it was because to me, it felt courageous, like a courageous thing to do. And that's why I told my dad, I was like, look, I feel like you've always encouraged me to be courageous in my life. And I feel like this is honorable and courageous because this is also a time when LGBT issues were really contentious in America. I know they are still now to some degree, but I mean, this is way before gay marriage came along. This is when, we still had don't ask, don't tell policy. It was when America was really wrestling with, and the most reasonable Americans were wrestling with their comfort level with issues surrounding LGBT rights. And so it was a fascinating time to be delving into those issues, to have it as a beat. So basically, I was on the LGBT beat for several years. It was during that I was honored with the Journalist of the Year award. And I think it was partly because I was the face of something that was very new, a broadcast that was done by a mainstream news organization for the LGBT community.
Do you think that journalism is a good profession for young LGBT, and I'll add Q, people to pursue? And by that, I mean, is it an industry in which being LGBTQ is embraced and supported and respected?
I would say so, absolutely. I can tell you that there are a lot of us who are in the profession right now, and some of the most highly placed people are gay, lesbian in this profession. And there's a camaraderie among people who are gay journalists. In fact, that award came from the National Lesbian Gay Journalists Association. And through that organization, I've met some very close friends and people who've supported me and people who I've supported. And what I sometimes tell young people is that it can be a real privilege. As Amex used to have as its slogan, membership has its privileges. I feel that way about being gay. Membership has its privileges. You have people who may have struggled with some of the same things that you have, and we're trying to support one another. Maybe that's becoming less of a factor now as it's becoming, dare I say, less difficult, thankfully, for many young people. I mean, growing up for me was a very, very difficult time. I grew up during a very dark period. It was the height of the AIDS epidemic when social acceptance of gay people was not what it is today by any stretch. And so where most people were still hiding in the closet, right? But I think that it's a great profession to go into because you'll find people who'll support you. Two, I think if I can go sort of deep here for a moment, I mean, I do feel like the gay experience, and I think this is true for many of us, is that we were sort of on the outside looking in, had that feeling. I don't know if young people feel the same way now, but I certainly did. On the outside looking in and kind of analyzing and trying to understand yourself and having to wrestle with, deep questions of identity at a young age. And I think it sort of created the empathy that we discussed earlier that I think is part and parcel of being a great journalist. I think those factors all play a role in who I am as a reporter and helped shape me into being a better reporter. And that idea of being an observer, that I think helps me every day. That's what I do.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jason. I think it's important for all of us to be able to have those authentic voices put things in perspective for us, because for young Java junkies today who may well still be struggling for whatever reason with being gay or trans or fill in the blank, they may not, for any fault of their own, but just not realize how far we have come in this country.
Ain't that the truth? It's been fascinating to be on this journey, be myself on the journey that America has been on. It's been one of the amazing transformations of our lifetime, is to see the change in attitudes and the change in institutions. And there have been some real heroes in the struggle for America as a whole to understand who we are and that we're everywhere and that we bring a lot to this world.
Amen. So, Jason, I want to flash back to when you were a Java junkie in college and you were at Georgetown. Is that right?
Correct.
And you got your BA in history. I'm guessing the answer is yes here. You knew what you wanted to do with that degree when you graduated. Is that right?
Oh, I did. I did, very much so. And I had gotten advice from people through internships who said, just become a great thinker. Read, learn, write. And I loved history. It was my subject, and where I did most of my reading for pleasure. And so it was a great major, great area of study for me, because it kind of let you dabble all over the world and study all kinds of different things and follow your curiosity and build your perspective and build your knowledge.
Yeah, I wish I had been a history major in college, but that's another story. Jason, you
were lazy. You studied Chinese or something like that, right?
Well, my major was political science, and then I did study Mandarin and Asian studies as like my concentration, but I wish I had been a history major in hindsight. But Jason, I wanted to ask you, what other extracurricular activities or jobs or clubs or whatnot that you may have been involved in when you were at Georgetown that in hindsight, after you were in the professional world, you said, wow, I really learned valuable skills there that are applicable to the real world?
Oh, good question. All right. You're having to make me think back. Well, I was part of the LGBT club at Georgetown and made some friends there that stayed with me for life. A lot of my time, I think, as I mentioned before, was running around with my own camera doing my own story. So I wasn't too involved in clubs. I never joined the newspaper. I was kind of doing my own thing. And I also ended up doing freelance work on the side for Channel One as a producer. I became, through an odd set of circumstances, became their DC producer.
Oh, wow.
Really weird. I don't think they realized how young I was. I don't know. The whole thing was still kind of baffles me how that happened. But that was taking up a lot of my time outside of my studies.
Well, let me ask you, because you in the espresso shots alluded to having taken off a year when you were an undergrad. When was that and why?
So that was after I finished my freshman year at Northwestern. I was in the Medill journalism school. And I was actually going through crisis, kind of an emotional crisis, an identity crisis. I was at that point deciding, do I want to come out? And I kind of realized that I had to if I was going to be happy in life. And I was I felt a little bit lost at that moment. And so I was like, I'm not concentrating well on my studies. I don't even know why I'm in the journalism school, but now I want to study history. I don't know what to do with myself. I just need to get away. And also I was just kind of feeling, I don't know, a little bit burnt out. I don't know. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to go somewhere. I'm just going to go just see what happens. And so I bought a plane ticket to Australia and didn't have much money left after that, and ended up just sort of hitchhiking my way around and doing jobs here and there. It was really just kind of test myself, just see, can I survive on my own without much money and just see what happens. And I took some funny jobs. I sold potpourri door to door for a month. I was a door to door potpourri salesman, and I learned some of my most valuable life lessons doing that. There's this guy who's this brilliant guy that I met who was staying at the same hostel that I was. And he went out with the van each day to go sell potpourri as well. You go to different neighborhoods. And I remember the first day I went out there, I went door to door, very earnestly trying to sell this junk, this overpriced junk. And came back to the van and I had most of my dried flowers and potpourri. And this guy, Steve, his was empty. I was like, what? We're selling the same thing. What did you do differently? And he took a drag of a cigarette and he's like, what are you telling people? And I was like, well, that they're lightly lacquered, scented, da, 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 da. And he's like, well, no, he's like, you're going about it the wrong way. Don't think of yourself as a door-to-door potpourri salesman. Think of yourself as a door-to-door entertainer. I was like, what? And he's like, come up with a shtick. And just if you can make people laugh, if you can engage people, they'll buy something from you. It's a token. I was like, okay, all right, I accept this challenge. And so then I started going out and I tried out different material. And I'm not much of a comedian, but I don't know, I just had fun with it and just tried to connect with people. Every time the door opened, you had to try to assess the person in front of you and be like, okay, what's going to keep them from shutting the door on me and have them at least talk to me and engage with me and have a conversation with me. And, it's funny. Now that I'm talking about, I haven't thought about this for a long, long time, but I think about it, it's a little bit like being a journalist where people are opening the door and you're trying to, as you used the word before, sort of seduce people to keep the door from closing. And you got to make some snap judgments and develop okay, how can I engage this person so that they don't slam the door before they've given me a chance?
That is such a great story, Jason.
Bizarre. Right?
No, but you know what? It's made up the fabric of your life, and it's obviously influenced the person that you've become. And so interesting. Jason, final time for coffee question. If you could go back to college and do it all over again, but based on the wisdom that you have now, what advice would you give yourself?
I've thought about this. One thing I would really wish I had done was mastered a language. I studied Spanish, but I wish I'd learned Arabic or Chinese. And that would have been, you don't have the time once you graduate from college, or most people don't. I certainly didn't, to be really learning a language and mastering it. Sure, you can do it, and there's lots of great tools for doing it, but life's too busy. At least it is for me. College is an opportunity to focus in on something, being forced and graded on developing mastery of something like that. So I wish I could have done that. It would have served me very well to have learned Arabic, that's for sure, or Chinese. Those are where some of the most important stories of our time are happening in those countries. And that's one of the challenges it's more challenging when you don't speak the language, that's for sure. So that's one thing. The other, beyond that, I rather than what I'd done differently, I wish I'd done even more of the thing I'd done right, which was go to office hours and engage with professors. And some of my most memorable experiences were going in to chat about a paper, but you end up talking about other things. And, that is what you're paying for. You get a chance to be among some really great minds. And the professors, if you want to go in and chat with them, that's what they're there for. And I wish I'd even taken more advantage of that than I did.
Yeah, actually, in episode 40, Lauren Zander, who is a really incredible life coach, her recommendation to Java junkies is that they need to be pursuing friendships that you could, basically lifelong friendships that you can develop not only with your classmates who are exceptional, but also with your professors.
Right. Get some one-on-one time. That's what it's about. That, I think, has been a refrain in my life. If you can get some one-on-one time with someone, that's where exciting things happen, and you never know where that's going to lead.
Well, Jason, we know where your career is going to continue to lead, which is...
I don't know where it's going, but...
I think what I mean by that is you are such an exceptional person, clearly unbelievably courageous, not just in some of the stupid things that you've done, like when you were in Kosovo and whatnot, putting your life at risk, but also some of the trailblazing things that you have done as a proud gay man. And I know, Jason, you have a plane ticket. And speaking of wishing that you spoke Arabic, you're headed off to the Arab world tonight. So I wish you a safe journey and look forward to seeing the stories that you're going to be coming back with. Thank you so much for making time for coffee with me and the Java Junkie community today.
Thank you, and thank you to your listeners. This has been a major bright spot for my day, that's for sure.
Thanks so much for listening to Time for Coffee, where the professionals in the jobs that most interest you always have time to grab coffee 24/7, no matter where you live. I have one quick favor to ask you. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Time for Coffee. Thanks so much.